Hello aspirants, welcome to PW OnlyIAS English channel. I'm here today with you to discuss the Hindu analysis that is an integral part of your civil services preparation. I've selected a few important articles along with the editorial which will help you analyze and understand the importance of newspaper reading, how to analyze a newspaper and build the momentum for the journey of civil services examination. So let's begin with this session of the Hindu analysis. So for you, we have selected few important articles which are relevant with respect to the civil services examination. First, the multidrug-resistant TB, which is on page 1 of the Hindu, which is very important with respect to the general studies paper 3. Quad leaders meet, page 3, relevant with respect to the international relations in GS paper 2. Technical textiles, which is in paper 11, which is important with respect to the economic dimension as present in GS paper 3. Then a very important tribal study which is relevant with respect to the vulnerable sections. The Atapadi's silent crisis, page 10, which is relevant, I guess, for GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4. The reason behind it is that this question can be asked in any general studies paper. Next, the editorial, where we are going to deal in brief with respect to the fiscal deficit article that has come in the editorial in page 6 with respect to GS3. So let's begin with each of them in detail. If you see this article, this was Center approves a new treatment regime for multi-drug resistance TB. Now, whenever you come across such articles, most of the students, what they do is they simply read this, they get some knowledge and they presume that they know everything with respect to this article. Now, please understand how you need to read this article and what you need to know is very, very important. Let's see a little bit of background. When we talk about tuberculosis, you should know that it is caused by a bacterium known as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now, in this case, in most of the cases which you see is, it generally affects the lungs, which is known as a pulmonary TB. It is not necessary that it impacts only the lungs. It can also impact the other organs. In that case, it is known as extrapulmonary TB. Now, why this article is here? Please remember that India accounts for close to 27% of the global TB cases that happen. Now, this is not only a burden with respect to the healthcare, also with respect to the economical aspect. And this needs to be changed and the issue with respect to TB needs to be resolved. So in this process, the government has also brought with new schemes, new missions, new drugs are being developed. So let us see the dimensions associated with this article in continuation with the basic knowledge of tuberculosis. Normal cases, when the treatment is subjected to patients, it is generally a 6-month course in which the patients are given antimicrobial drugs. Now, this continues for 6 months, but the topic mentions the multi-drug-resistant TB. Now, it is very, very important that you understand what this concept basically means. Now, you will be asking me, sir, you have mentioned certain big scientific biological names over here. Remember, this question can be very well asked in your examinations, mains as well as preliminary examination. So, these are certain technicalities which you need to know. What is multi-drug resistance TB? See, what happens is that due to the misuse of the antibiotics, when the bacteria is inside a body, the bacteria itself becomes resistant to the various drugs that we eat. Now, if you misuse the antibiotics, for example, whenever you're feeling like feverish, you take the antibiotics. What happens? The bacteria that might be present becomes resistant. In this process, we see in a long term, a multi-drug resistance scenarios do arise. Now, see what happens with respect to multi-drug resistance TB. It is a form of TB caused by bacteria that do not respond to these two particular medicines. That is isoniazid and rifampicin. These are two very powerful first line anti-TB drugs. What does first line mean? In case you have TB, there are certain drugs of a lower intensity which you might be subjected to. In case that is not working, then a little advanced version that might be a second line. So if they are not responding to two these two medicines, that means the bacteria is resistant even to these, then in that case, it is known as multi-drug resistance. Now they are resistant to what? The first line anti-TB drugs. In order to counter that, there is a second line anti-TB drug which is known as the bedaquiline. Now, this is the name of the drug which a patient might be subject to. Now, this helps to resolve the issue of the multi-drug resistance. Now, we know this is the basic concept, right? Now, coming back to the article says that, see, center approves a new treatment, right? New treatment. This is the basics you have understood. What is TB, pulmonary, extrapulmonary, the burden on India, what is the treatment, what is multi-drug resistance. Now comes the case with respect to what the article says. See, India wants to eliminate TB from India by 2025. This is what India's aim is. Now, the Sustainable Development Goal aims to eliminate TB by 2030. Now, this is a very ambitious target. Now, if you want to eliminate TB, it is very important that you need to bring new drugs that will resolve the issue of these drug resistance that are present. In this process, the Ministry of Health has approved a new treatment. What is that treatment? Let's see. In this process, a new anti-TB drug, listen to this very carefully, Pretomanid has been approved by the Ministry of Health, which can be taken in combination with certain other drugs like bedaquiline, along with it linezolid. Now, this new drug that is present there has been introduced by or approved by the Ministry of Health. That is why this article is mentioned over here. Why this is important? See, not only from the perspective of preliminary examination where you might be asked what is multi-drug resistance. In the mains examination also you might be asked what are the certain health targets, in that you can code these targets of elimination of TB by 2025. Sustainable Development Goal aims it to eliminate it by 2030. Another thing that can be asked, what are the reasons why this multi-drug resistance or drug resistance develops in a body? In the bodies, due to the bacteria who are resistant to it. Now see what happens. Antibiotics used in the livestock industry. Very often it has been seen that various articles that have come up which show that in the livestock industries, let us say the chickens and all, they have been subjected to various injections in which antibiotics are given to them so that the weight of the chicken in a way increases, that can be of a commercial use to the industries. Various cases have been filed, various reports have come over them. What happens is that when they are subjected to these antibiotics, when you consume them, that antibiotic dose comes into your body also. Now, in spite of not directly consuming the antibiotics, the antibiotic content is coming into your body. Because of that, the bacteria present in your body will become resistant to the certain set of antibiotics that are present. One of the cases. Second, self-diagnosis. We all consider sometime that we all are doctors. We consider YouTube channels as a means which are telling you to be how you can become doctors, and you tend to take medicines on your own. Very often the most common one is the antibiotics that you consume without even any knowledge about it. So self-diagnosis, according to the World Health Organization, is one of the important reasons why anti or multi-drug resistance is being developed in the body. Next is wrong diagnosis. Very often, particularly in the rural region, it has been said that wrong diagnosis along with the over-diagnosis and subject to the patients to a lot of antibiotics can again lead to development of multi-drug resistance. Next is mutations. Some mutations might take place in the bacteria itself, which can make it resistant to the various drugs. So now this is what you were expected to know when you are reading this article. What happens is that we as aspirants, or you as aspirants, you'll be seeing when you read this article, you think just reading the heading does not completely make you aware of what the intricacies of this topic are. So this is what the analysis of the article that was mentioned in today's article is. So please note down the details that are mentioned here. Make a note out of it. Read it again. Make a note in your brain itself that what multi-drug resistance is, what TB is, what the government's aim are, and you can revise it again. Revise it again. It will be in your brain, I'm telling you. And at the time of answer writing or during your preliminary examination, you will see for yourself that those facts will shine differently. And you will be able to differentiate between the right answer and the wrong answer. Clear? This was the first article. Now let's move on to the next articles. Now please remember, this is a very important article with respect to General Studies Paper 2 dealing with international relations. Now you'll be asking, sir, when this topic has come, how do we analyze, to what extent shall we go in this topic? Please remember, you need to differentiate between, I told you in the previous video also, certain facts and certain issues that are going to prolong for some time. Now this article says Quad leaders are scheduled to meet in United States on September 21. Now today is 7th. This news would be coming again and again. When the leaders are going to meet, then also you are going to have the editorials which will deal with what are the positives, what are the issues that are prevailing, what can be done, what are the dimensions that we need to cover. So right now when you're reading, you should be aware just what the Quad is. Because the various intricacies that you're going to study will be done later as you come closer to 21st of September. This is what is important from the perspective of preparing for civil services. If you start doing R&D right now, it will be of no use because you will get the articles later on. So the basics that you need to understand, see, this is an upcoming topic under the category of issues which will continue. So we will be taking these in the form of editorials and other analysis in detail later on. The basics, that is, Quad basically stands for the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. It comprises the 4 members, that is India, Australia, Japan and United States of America. Clear? In the process of understanding, please understand what is the vision of Quad. The vision of Quad is that work as a force for the global good, that they should act together for the global commons or the global good or the benefit of the whole world. Along with it, the very important aspect is support for an open, free and inclusive Indo-Pacific region which is prosperous and resilient. So they want this region to be peaceful. This is one of the major aims of the Quad group is. Now let's move a little bit with respect to the origin. Please remember, you don't have to do the R&D, just need to have some idea. In 2004, a tsunami core group was formed. This can be seen as a naive or the infant Quad group. In 2007, we see it was basically formalized by the Japanese PM, but it became or remained dormant for a very long time. In 2017, the first official talks were taking place on the sidelines of the East Asia Summit at that time. In 2021, the first virtual Quad Leaders Summit, which was hosted by the United States, took place. In 2022 and 2023, the second and the third Quad Leaders Summit took place, which was hosted by Japan. Now, in the beginning of the year of 2024, it was assumed that probably India will host the 2024 summit. But as the article mentions over here, please see this very carefully. New Delhi will miss the turn to host the Quad Summit. So India was expected to host, but it is not hosting. In turn, United States of America is hosting the Quad meeting. That means the exact location is still not decided where it is going to host, but it will be hosted by the United States of America. After having understood this dimension, please understand, as the article also mentions, that there are broad categories on which the Quad meeting is going to take place, and the areas of focus is going to be these many areas that I've mentioned. We're going to deal with the infrastructural and connectivity discussions, maritime security, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, health security, climate change, and counter-terrorism. Now, please remember one thing. Once the dialogue is over, once the meeting is over, you'll realize they're going to have declarations on all these topics. So at that time, we will have the material to fill these details that I mentioned here. So please remember that these are the brief ideas that you need to know. But as the issue prolongs, you will get more information on that and we will cover them in detail even in the editorials. So let us continue further. Why it is important for India? Please remember, it is important for the look east policy of India. Like look east policy of India. It will increase the defense engagement between all these countries. Economic collaboration can be there, benefits for all the four countries along with their collaboration with the other countries. It can be used as a means to counter China, because you knew that China is increasing its tentacles to in the Indo-Pacific region, in the South China Sea and other regions also. So Indo-Pacific, the Quad group can be seen as a means to counter China too. Along with it, more active engagement in the Indo-Pacific region. So this group can be seen as a tactical counter to Chinese rise across the global economy. Now, having said that, this forms your basic of what is its importance with respect to India and certain other dimensions that you need to know. If you want to quickly note it, please note down all the details that are mentioned here. This can be helpful to you with respect to the understanding of a particular topic. Now, let's move on to the next topic. There's an article that is mentioned over here, which is technical textile. Now, please remember, in the GS paper 3, which deals with various aspects of economy, the question can definitely come, what are technical textiles? What are the various areas in which this can be used? And why it is important with respect to India? Now, the heading basically is technical textiles will cross $10 billion in export by 2030. This is the basic heading that is given. Now, the UPSC, while preparing the questions for the mains or the prelims, may not necessarily just pick up this. For them, it is important. Did you understand what technical textile is? And then possibly how it is useful for India? And what are the various areas of application? Now, see, technical textile. Now, textile generally we talk about, for example, I'm wearing a coat over here. Now, wearing this coat adds aesthetics to what I'm wearing. It is like a aesthetic purpose. But when I'm talking about technical textile, these are not for decorative or textile purpose. These are specifically used for the functionality they carry on and not for the aesthetic purpose. Let us see the definition of what the technical textile are. These textile or materials are primarily used for the technical performance and the functional properties rather than aesthetics or the derivative purpose. For example, if assumably Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana is being implemented in the rural regions. Now we all know that the Kacha road being present there might be spoiled because of the muddiness that is there because of a large amount of rainfall that is happening. Now those technical textile can be used as a layer to cover, let us say, the rural roads. Now that will increase the efficiency, that will increase the life also of the rural roads. Now this is one of the applications that we can see of the technical textiles, because they are not for the aesthetic purpose. They are there for the performance that is present there. Even nowadays, in the construction of the various expressways also, you will be seeing certain textile material being used along the sides of the expressways. Those are also technical textiles being used because they are known for their strength, durability that is present there and do not get easily spoiled by, let us say, rain or certain chemical reaction that are taking place. Now, let's see what are the other details with respect to the technical textiles. Now, these are certain basic important facts that you can know, as the article itself mentions. Now, the global market of the technical textile is $300 billion, whereas the Indian market size is $25 billion. GDP contribution to India's GDP is 2.3%. Now, itself is a big number, but we can still become global leaders because of the size of the country and the availability of resources in order to make the technical textiles. Now, the question would come, where can we use these textiles? Now, there are certain words over mentioned here. we can use is and the agro-technical sector like in horticulture, cloth tech, we can make shoelaces which are of such quality which might not get spoiled. Geotech, road infrastructure that I have mentioned in the rural roads presumably, even in along the expressways. Home tech, it can be used in durable mattresses. Indutech, they can be used for making the conveyor belts. Meditech, that means they can be used for making diapers. Mobitech, they can be used for making the airbags. Sport tech, for example, making the nets, for example, the cricket nets and the nets for various sports purposes. Protech for defense purposes. Now, defense purposes can be various camping sites or various materials which are durable in nature for the army men. Now, they don't have to be for the aesthetics purpose. They should be for the durable reasons that the army adopts. So, these material can be very useful in case of the functionality that they offer. So, now these are some of the sectors where the technical textiles can be used. Let us move ahead. The article also mentions a very important program, that is the National Technical Textile Mission. Now, this mission has been launched by the Ministry of Textile. What does it aim at? See, it wants to make India a global leader in this sector. Now, it has four major pillars on which this mission is basically resting. It works on the research, innovation and development. That means new researches, new developments and innovations need to be made so that we can improve the quality and the functionality of the textile that is being created. Next is promotion and market development. Why? We can not only be the major domestic consumers, but we can also be the country which can export. As we've already mentioned, we can be a major exporters of the technical textiles. Next is export promotion, as we have already mentioned. Next is education, training and skill development. Now, we all know that Government of India has been functioning and working on the skill development. This can be one of the newer sectors where students can be trained, aspirants can be trained so that they can benefit not only through starting their own businesses, but also in various industries which are related to the technical textile business. Now, these were the certain things that you expected to understand, learn and implement. In the coming days, we will also be coming up with certain questions also that could be asked on these topics. Now, for example, in the examination, they can ask you, what are technical textiles? Help us to analyze and understand how technical textiles can be a source of revenue generation for the country. Now, after having mentioned the, let us say, what technical textiles are, you can go ahead with mentioning the market size, details regarding that, the application of that, through the export mechanism, so much revenue can be generated. All these dimensions can be mentioned there. Later on, we need to analyze that what government is doing in order to achieve that. In that case, you will be mentioning the National Technical Textile Mission. That will add comprehensive or holistic aspects to your answer. So remember one thing, this newspaper itself is so holistic that if you do it properly, it gives you enough knowledge that you can write beautiful answers in your examination. Let's move ahead. Now, this is a very, very important topic. I had told you this can be taken from the GS2 perspective under the category of vulnerable sections. But I personally believe that this topic is important from the perspective of GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4. Why? Please understand, it is very sad to hear about the conditions of the tribals in India in various parts. This is one of those examples which is not only a case study, but also an eye-opener. Over here, we see Atapadi's silent crisis, which talks about the problem of the indigenous people in this district of Kerala. Now, tribals are a vulnerable sections. Let us see and understand this article in depth. See, if you see Kerala, if you see the map of Kerala that I've drawn here, this is the Atapadi district that is here, right? Right over here, which I've colored in green. Now, it has 33,000 tribal people there, living in the tribal hamlets, which are 192 in number, in the lap of the Western Ghats. Now, this is a basic detail that the article mentions. Now, what is happening over here, we need to understand. What were the observations made and mentioned in this article? They say that neonatal deaths are on rise among the tribals due to malnourishment. Whenever we study the aspects of food crisis and all, we all say that India is self-sufficient. Yes, but quantity wise, if we see, yes, a lot of food is being produced, but do we realize that over here, people are dying because of the malnourishment? Where is that loophole that is lying? We need to analyze that. That is why there are certain loopholes might be existing. So we see due to malnourishment, neonatal deaths are there. Underweight children, merely 1.1 kg being born. We have cases of stillbirth. And we even have cases of the rising maternal mortality among these tribals. These observations were made when I was reading the article, and we see what are the causes for these problems. That was very shocking. Now let's see the dimensions that are associated here. Now the causes of the problem is the change in their culture. Please remember one thing. Culture is a very broad word. It can be with respect to knowledge, it can be respect to your food habits, it can be respect to your religion, it can be respect to your lifestyle activities, anything, right? Changes in the culture, according to the article, are the major causes for the problems that they are facing. Now let us analyze them. The article mentions that rice consumption has been a focus to few years rather than a balanced diet. Earlier, the indigenous people over here used to consume majorly millets and along with it some quantity of rice. Now that used to complete or create a composition in a form of a balanced diet. Now when only rice was being focused, that resulted in what? Certain essential components of your diet which you basically the tribals consumed, which was started missing. Now that was one of the reasons that has been mentioned which led to rise of malnourishment among the tribals. This is one of the reasons. Second is nature of community kitchen changing. Now what does this basically mean? Please remember, the tribals are a very close-knit group. They tend to stay together, live together, and whenever food is being prepared, it is prepared in a form of a common kitchen. Like if it is being prepared, it is prepared for the whole tribal community. Now, as the time are rising, time is changing, we realize that the concept of common kitchen is changing to an concept of individual kitchen. That is, there is a rise of the concept of individualism among the tribals also. Just take an example. If there are 10 people, few working men. Now they go there, if they have a common kitchen at home, they will bring the products, let us say from a family of day-to-day lives only. If those people are going there working and bringing certain products that can be consumed or made in a common kitchen, that automatically the cost or the expenditure decreases because the common kitchen is there. If supposingly every family has a different kitchen, you will be realizing the overall expenditure would be much more than the common kitchen. This is what is happening among the tribals also. As the concept of common kitchen decreases and individual kitchen rises, there would be deficits with respect to what is being consumed. This is also one of the reasons for rise in malnourishment. Third, role of land. Remember one thing, in case of the tribals, land is community owned. That means you do not have this is my land, that is my land. No, there is no individual ownership of the land. That is the concept of community land exists. Now what is happening? With changing time, the role of the community land has changed to individual ownership. Now when individual ownership comes, you realize it results in again community kitchen concept also changing to individual kitchen. So that means people are more self-centric or converting into self-centric than the concept of we. That means the we feeling that used to exist, that has changed over time. Lastly, the issue of alcoholism. Earlier, the focus was on a balanced diet. Now, the concept of alcoholism is being focused. People have been consuming alcohols to a very great aspect, a very great dimension. So, what is going on is their healths are deteriorating. They might not be working and no revenue will be generated. automatically that will result in no money being there, and automatically an outcome is malnourishment also. These are certain reasons that have been observed as the causes of the problems that are there. Now the article stops here. Now according to me, I personally feel that I have given certain recommendations which have been recommended by Kaka Committee report. Now this is one of the very important reports by the Government of India which deals with the tribal issues and how to resolve them. Though there are various recommendations, if we are studying a topic, we need to also understand what the solutions can be. The Kaka Committee, basically, though it is written as XA, it is pronounced as Kaka. The Kaka Committee report says empower the tribal research centers. Why? The tribal research centers will be responsible for noting and understanding what the tribal knowledge is. Once you have that knowledge, it helps you to analyze the culture. When you know their culture, a required or what the correct intervention should be is actually known. Otherwise, what happens? The government might be providing the schemes without understanding what the culture of the tribals may be. Right? So that is why tribal research centers are very, very important. Education and awareness. Now, education and awareness, again, very important aspect. This not only deals with the awareness among the tribals, but also awareness among the forest bureaucracy that is involved and the necessary stakeholders. Third, mix of tribal and modern techniques. When the government of India is having some intervention with respect to, let us say, modern day medicines or let us say modern day schemes, it is very important that they, along with the tribal research centers, should understand what the tribal medicines are there, what are the tribal techniques, because unnecessary intervention among the tribals without knowing their culture will lead to certain other aspects or negative dimensions. Now, if tribal medicines or tribal techniques are known, that along with the combination of the modern methodologies might help to bring in better results. Next is respecting the tribal culture. Please remember, we need to understand that we have to respect the diversity of culture that is present. Our culture might be very different from that of the tribal cultures, but they are equally citizens of India. We need to respect them, and if we do not respect them, unnecessary intervention will lead to certain problems in their, let us say, rights with respect to land, their rights with respect to the food, as they have already been suffering from the time of the Britishers. When they were declared as criminals, they were forced to change their economic aspects. Many were forest tribes. They were forced to become agriculturalists, and later on, when the land was taken by the land zamindars, they were forced to become laborers. So we need to respect their culture, and their culture also includes the dimension of, let us say, their form of worship. For example, we all know the case of the Khon tribes and their considering of the Niyamgiri hill as their deity, where the Supreme Court had ordered that the mining will activities will not take place because the Niyamgiri hill is seen as a deity by the Khon's tribe. Similar concepts need to be understood by the people also, that tribals have their unique culture, and once we understand them, their governance also becomes easy, and along with them, their development will also become easy. Now, this was the article which can be used from an ethical dimension, from the vulnerable section aspects, from diversity of population in paper 1 also with respect to economic dimension also. So this article can be used and the question can be asked in any of the papers. And obviously, if you have option like anthropology or sociology, you can use them as case studies in your papers also. Let's move ahead. Now, please remember, this is the editorial that was present here. This is relatively important, so we have taken this for the consideration. Please remember, now I am starting this series. You very well know that I am taking from the consideration that you are a fresher who hasn't read the newspapers. Now, when you see this article, immediately the first step that you're going to do is that I will not read this article. Why? Because this has words which you do not know, right? This is a general perception that is going to be there. I'm very sure about that. Remember, now this article deals with economics. Many people might have not read economics because they might be starting with their preparation. What is important is, please remember, the initial days when you are preparing and you might have not read these articles, you can use Google a little bit to find what the meanings of these articles or words are, which over here we are helping you with, right? So my request to you is, As we go ahead over here, these important topics or points will be discussed, and along with we'll understand what the meaning of this article are or what core meaning of this article is. So let's begin with a broad understanding. See, there are words like fiscal deficit being used, fiscal prudence, that we need to balance or deal with the fiscal aspects in a very, very careful manner. Along with it, there are various words that are mentioned here. Let us say, what is GDP? There's a word like nominal GDP mentioned, debt to GDP ratio is being mentioned. So we will do certain definitions before we read this article. That is very important. So let's see. Back to basics is the class. Fiscal deficit means the total expenditure of the country minus the total receipts, whatever you have received as a source of income, excluding the borrowings. Now that means total expenditure minus total receipts of the country are basically the revenue receipts, right? Deficit itself means that the expenditure is much more than what your income is, right? So this is the fiscal deficit. Now the revenue deficit is total revenue receipts minus the total revenue expenditure. Third is debt to GDP ratio. It is the total debt of a country divided by the total GDP of a country. Now these are the three things you can just see and note it down if you want. The basic things that you need to know. As you will be proceeding with your preparation for the civil services and covering the topic of economics, you will see you will be better analyzing these things. But meanwhile, those who do not, you can understand what these top words basically mean. This is what I expect when you're reading the editorials. While reading the editorial, if you are able to understand, okay, fiscal deficit is here. Yes, I understand what fiscal deficit is. That means you are a person who is ready for understanding these articles. So back to basics, fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, and debt to GDP ratio. Now, along with it, there are certain words that are mentioned over here. Nominal GDP and real GDP. So please understand, when I use the word GDP, what does the word GDP means? GDP is a total value of the goods and services produced in a country over a period of time. Let us say 1 year. The total value of the goods and services produced over a period of time, let us say 1 year in a country. Now, this is a simple definition of a GDP. Now, the word nominal is used in the article. So, we need to know what nominal GDP means, because this can be asked in your preliminary examination also, and for that matter, indirectly in your mains examination if they want to check you conceptually. Nominal GDP is one in which we are taking this definition, but we are not taking the inflation into consideration. What the inflation is there prevailing right now. When we are not taking the inflation and simply taking this definition, then it is a nominal GDP. But if I take the inflation into consideration with respect to this definition, then it is the real GDP. Clear, everybody? The nominal GDP and the real GDP. So this is another thing that you need to know. Now, one more thing. Within the article or within the editorial, there is a mention of the word fiscal responsibility and budget management. Please understand. You realize sometimes when we're talking about fiscal deficit, we said the total expenditure minus the total receipts. That means you realize that expenditure is more than what the receipts are, or what we are getting, except excluding the borrowing. Now, accordingly, the government can expend as much as money as they want. They can do anything, right? This is a quite presumption that when you're reading the article, this might come into your mind. But remember, there has to be certain boundary or the foundation on which the government can basically spend also. Yes or no? Or what? Because if they want to spend more, they will have to borrow more, because the revenue that is coming there might be less. So when you borrow, that leads to increase in the debt. Now, if the debt is more, that will in a long term cause a crisis to the country. Now, in order to manage that, a particular act is there, which we see as Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which was instituted in 2004, which aimed at setting a target for debt reduction, aiming to limit the general debt to 60% of the GDP. That means if the country wants to take a debt, it can take a debt equivalent to 60% of the GDP. Let us assume I have 100 rupees as my GDP. Now, if 100 rupees is the GDP, right? Now, if I want to take a debt, I can take 60 rupees as a maximum debt. Now, this includes by the central government as well as the state government combined. Now, this is making a restriction or boundary on which the amount of debt that the country can take. Otherwise, if the country starts taking, let us say, 200 rupees, 500 rupees, while the GDP is 100, that will in a long term leads to a crisis. Various South American countries have faced such crisis and various countries are still facing. So, in order to manage the budget as well as the fiscal aspects of the country, we need to have certain acts which are going to limit this. So, this is where the article comes into being. It basically talks about fiscal responsibility and budget management, where it mentions the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which was basically instituted in 2003, which keeps a cap on 60% of the GDP. Now remember, the FRBM committee report wanted to achieve this by 2023, where 40% out of this 60 is by the central government and 20 by the state. Combined, it forms a 60%. Why I mentioned this? The reason behind it is that we over here see that there are certain issues with what are going on. What we have done, please remember, before we are reading this article, we have gained certain knowledge. Understand again. We know what fiscal deficit is, what revenue deficit is, and debt to GDP ratio is. We know what is nominal GDP and real GDP. We know that certain act was passed in order to limit the debt to which a country can take, or India can take for that matter, which is limited to 60%. 40% part is by the central government and 20 out of the 60 is by the state government. Combined 40 plus 20 is 60%. Now, what we basically see is this target is again being delayed. Over here, the article mentions that there is a problem of the rising expenditure. Why problematic? Please remember, during the 1990s, we saw a similar trend that rising expenditure was there, the income was not there. So it will lead to a crisis if similar conditions continue. So what happens is the budget 2024-25 aims for the prudence or the proper management of these targets by 26-27. Do you realize what the problem is? Every time the budget comes, we tend to delay these targets. Why? Because it is an act, it can be amended by the parliament. So every time we are moving towards the date in which the targets of this managed by as Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, what the targets have been given, the moment we come closer to that year, again the act is amended so that the targets are further delayed. Similarly, in 24-25 budget, it is said, okay, we will achieve by 26-27. So in a way, we are amending it according to our discretion. This what will lead to in a long term, again, more expenditure and leading to the problem of fiscal deficit. So this similarly, the article mentions about certain statistics which you don't have to go into detail. Broadly, it is basically mentioned that the problem is that we are shifting with the dates or the years that we will achieve this target after, let us say, 26-27 and so forth. Now, the article also mentions that there is issue with respect to the savings. Remember that earlier what used to happen within a country, people used to save a lot. Now that money used to be available in the banks, which was like, it could be used by the banks, that is government also. Now the problem happening is that people are not putting their money in the banks. There is fall in savings. Now there is further a threat to the government as a resource also. So now what happens is that over here, other points are being presented that how a fiscal deficit crisis can be further aggravated because there is fall in the saving as people are not saving more. The more money earlier which used to be kept in the bank are not being kept. This is a major issue with respect to the article that has been mentioned over here. Now they say that similar trend is being observed by the other countries also, in United Kingdom also, and for that matter Japan also. We realize that similar problems are there, though India is relatively well placed in comparison to these other countries, but they realize that because of the COVID condition had been mentioned here, it is very difficult to come back to the similar level right now. It will take a few years. Why? Because you realize during the COVID time, a lot of expenditure was made on vaccines, public health care. So at that time, the income was not coming. There was no revenue for the country, but a lot of expenditure was being made. The excessive expenditure was made. Now there was more debt on the country. Now, in order to come to a pre-COVID level, it will take some time. So that is why, though the date has been extended, the aim over here is that we need to achieve the fiscal prudence. That means we need to achieve a level that has been aimed by the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which is being mentioned over here. Which is being mentioned over here. This was a broad idea of the editorial that is mentioned. See, students, today was the first day of the analysis of the Hindu newspaper. As we move ahead, we are going to get with more analysis, more dimensions would be studied over here. Along with it, we'll be having certain MCQs, certain discussions also. More articles would be covered. These in the newspaper, these were the major articles that were important with respect to 7th of September. Hope you liked it. We have tried to analyze it from a very holistic purpose. Along with it, what is important for civil services. Please remember, the whole newspaper is not important. There are certain articles which are important, which you need to read for the prelims and the mains examination, which have been covered here. My request would be, please remember, this is to aid you, help you understand what the articles basically mean, what they are saying. It is also helping you to read the articles and the newspapers well. So this was me signing off from PW OnlyIAS English from today's aspect or analysis of the Hindu. We'll return on Monday again, continue with this series from Monday to Saturday. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any recommendations, please let us know. We will be working on them and delivering you the best quality content in English. Take care and Jai Hind.